Paul, how are the pipes doing? We got 2 thumbs up on the pipes. Good.
All right, I think we're back. So let me kind of get out of here. We'll go to our deep dive. And we're going to do a lot of this actually in the products. So I'm going to open that up, just kind of get that queued up for us.
Now, were you purposely going light on people last time because this deep dive is going to be so technical, they're going to be pulling their hair out?
You know, when we talk about customer service, you know, usages in general, there's only so deep I can go, right? Because customer service, we're all doing customer service all the time, right? Without even realizing it, honestly. So the deep dive is going to go a lot more in depth. It's going to be a lot more technical, just to get everybody kind of prepared here, and a lot more content ready. In fact, let me get that content in front of me. Now, the site I'm going to demonstrate everything in when we get to that point is the CS training site. And we can certainly provide you a link and a login to the CS training site later, but after the session, after today's webinar, if you guys would like. Just ask, please.
Yeah, reach out to Paul or myself
Exactly.
or Mike Wright, any of us, we can give you the URL and credentials.
Let me see if I can resume share so everybody can kind of see my screen here. All right. And there's our deep dive slides. I think we're ready to get back, right? All right, let me kind of dig in. I hope everybody else is ready too. So now, here we go. And so just like I did when I started customer service, right? Those of you that know me, once again, that would have worked with me, right? Right, Ed, right? I'm looking at you, but know that I'm a stickler for vocabulary, right? A common language, right? In fact, you know, I've had whole meetings here at Issuetrak. We got a simple spreadsheet, but I wanted a whole meeting to talk about the terms in that we're going to use to trade stuff back and forth, right? So I don't know if that's a good example for everybody, but I know Ed remembers that, so because he was there. All right, so let's kind of dig in here. The first thing we need to talk about, we're going to talk about asset management, so we have to define that term asset. What am I thinking about? What should you be thinking about when we say the word asset? An asset is a record, thing, or entity, intentionally broad there, right? That has value to an organization, right? Money's involved here, right? It has a real value. It either makes money for you or it costs you money, either way, but it still keeps your customers happy either way. And you know, when we think about that coffee company, right, where I have manufacturing customers that are cutting foam in their factories, right? And each one of their assets is a CNC mill, right? So a customer controlled milling machine that comes down and cuts shapes out of the foam. So that's an idea of an asset, right? Something that has value to them, right? And it's a money maker, right? It makes their processes and operations possible. So an asset can be linked to a user, an organization, a department, a location, or an issue for combined reporting. And we're going to talk heavily about that side of things too. You know, why would you even use the asset management module? Why do we even care about assets? Well, the real power here is to take all of those assets and look at them across your site, right? Look at them across organizations, across users, across departments, locations, that type of thing. So then we've got to talk about, so now we know what assets are, these things that have value, right? What about asset management? What's that, right? Well, the asset management in Issuetrak, it allows you to track, enter, and manage assets. Assets can be associated with issues for reporting. And that word can, right? Notice it can be, maybe, right? I mean, right here in the definition, it says may be associated with issues, right? Whoa, right? I have customers that don't even use issues with their assets. They just want a place to record their equipment. So when they do a PM or when they have a note or when they just want to see how many pieces of equipment they have a place they can go and search and query and look at that, right? So when we think about asset management, it's a little bit of a broader idea than assets on issues, which we're going to talk about that too a little bit. Fair warning here, right? Now, the other piece that I wanted to talk about in there, or that I wanted to pay some lip service to, is Track PC and Scan PC. These are the proprietary applications that Issuetrak uses to scan and audit Windows-based and now Mac computers. Notice how I put that, right? So you can run Track PC. Well, there's a version of Track PC that will run on Macs now. Mac. We like to call it Mac Track internally. Track Mac. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, Ed. But there we go. And we use that to populate PC type assets or assets that relate back to a computer, a laptop or a desktop. Now, let me be very clear, right? I'm kind of doing the same thing I did to you guys over in our main session, right? Today, we're going to steer clear. Issuetrak is very good at tracking PC type assets, especially when you use Track PC or Scan PC to populate those PC assets, right? That's why we're so good at it, right? And the software that goes along with that, right? Track PC can even go out and look for software that's installed on those machines. However, we're not going to talk about that much today. We're going to stay out of the PC type assets that use Track PC and Scan PC. And we'll think about doing those in a later session, maybe in a different webinar, or maybe even in a different forum. We'll do a session about those later on, right? For today, we're going to kind of ignore Track PC and Scan PC and talk about non-PC type assets. So what do I mean about that? Or why would you, let me go on to the next piece of this, right? What about, why would you use the asset management module? Kind of intrigues you, right? Well, Issuetrak's asset management module costs money, right? It's not free, is it, Tony? Do you ever give it away, right? Right? So when you're spending money with us, we want to be good stewards of that money, and you want to make sure that if you don't need it, you're not buying it. Now, I'm going to say a lot of really good things and show some really real benefits to Issuetrak's asset management module. But there's times when it's not that great also, right? You don't really need it to get where you're going, right? And I'm going to give you guys some keys for kind of recognizing that difference. When should you use it, right? So let me put it, and really what it boils down to, right? So I'm gonna kind of condense the whole conversation into one or two sentences here. If you have assets that you need to reference across issues, locations, orgs, or departments, then the asset management module will be worth it. I can guarantee it. For example, if you have a bunch of equipment and you want to estimate the cost of ownership or the return on investment, or if you don't care about cost, but you want to manage trends and identify frequent flyers, right? You want to know which machines have problems more often, right? Then you're going to need asset management in Issuetrak to do that, right? To show that relationship. In those cases, asset management is probably going to be worth it for you to be able to see, well, I had 30 issues with this manufacturer's equipment, but I only had 2 with this manufacturer's across the same amount of time. Right? Gives you a real sense about what to buy and what decisions to make. All right, so let's get in, and one more thing before we actually get into the product here, and we'll go to the next slide. When we talk about non-PC assets, right, what type of stuff can we be talking about? Well, remember our definition of asset is very broad, right? Could be anything that of value, not necessarily something you could lay your hand on. It could be software, right? It could be HVAC equipment. In fact, all of these examples come from customers of Issuetrak. And Tony, this is the one we were just talking, right? This is the one we were just talking about. You told me, hey, well, talk about that, right? Well, I have one customer that they shape foam. They buy these big blocks of foam and then they cut it into shapes for the aerospace industry. You would not believe how much of an airplane is built out of foam, right? Next time you go, look around, you won't see it, but it's inside, it's behind within the airframe, within the wings. There's all sorts of foam in there, this special type of foam that our customer shapes with Issuetrak. And for them, each asset is a different piece of manufacturing equipment. Like I said, a foam lathe or a CNC machine that cuts foam all day, right? And they want to know how often that machine has had its preventive maintenance done. Or they want to know when was the last time the operator of that machine had a problem, right? And then they can go back and look because they've got asset management. One of the other big ones I see is HVAC equipment, right? This is huge for our customers that are doing facilities management, right? If you're a facilities manager, you've got to know, maybe for a whole building, right? You've got to know how many times, when was the last time that the preventive maintenance was done on the roof unit, on the AC unit that sits up on that roof, right? You want to make sure that somebody's inspected that to make sure it's not falling through the roof, to make sure that it's not leaking Freon, because that's a big deal, right? I have one customer, and the whole reason they use Issuetrak is to keep the EPA happy, right? They had so many leaks in their industrial chillers that they needed a system to keep the EPA happy so they could show they weren't leaking Freon. So every time there's a fix to something that contains Freon, it goes into Issuetrak and it's recorded as part of an asset, right? And then they need to go back and record. So when they stand in front of the chiller, the asset name, asset number is right there, and they can tell you the last time it was fixed, the last time it had a leak check done on it, what the normal pressure should be on that thing for the Freon. So that's just some examples, and you can see there's even more here. That idea of,
and Paul, I mean, you were talking earlier, you know, that first section was the customer support. It works really well from the asset perspective to support your customers' installed base of equipment that you've sold them. Remember that company with the expensive digital printers?
That's right. That's right. So they're just like our coffee maker example, right? Our coffee company example. We've got another company, instead of coffee makers, they provide digital printers, right? So, and this is very common, right? You don't want a digital printer is a really high value expense for your company. So you may rent those from a company, and then that company comes in and does the maintenance and supplies the paper and brings in the toner when it needs to be changed, right? So that's the idea. For them, an asset is a printer. And they know exactly when the last time it was serviced and exactly the last time the customer had problems with it. So we're going to get into how this looks in Issuetrak in just a minute. In fact, about right now, in fact. So I think that gives everybody kind of an example. If anybody's got questions, please ask away. But let's get into Issuetrak and actually look at how this works. You know, all these different varieties of assets, right? So I said, I'm going to have to exit here. And we're going to go over to the CS training site. Now, if you've got the asset management module, then you probably know to go to modules and asset management. And the first thing you see, so I want to kind of paint this picture, and I'm going to zoom in a little so you guys can kind of see, and we'll get a little magnification on that. You guys let me know if you can't or have trouble reading this, you know, so that I can enlarge.
It looks
more.
nice.
So the idea here, right, look at the different types of equipment we've got. We've got PC assets right here, these 21 items and laptops sitting right alongside this other stuff that's non-PC type assets. And where I really want to concentrate today, we're going to concentrate on these printer items, right? So you've got this whole database of assets that kind of sits separate. It's kind of separate and apart from your issues database. Now, of course, we're going to cover how to tie those two things together, right? So when you select an asset on an issue, you're making an association, or you're tying them together. But in essence, you're setting the two up separately. So this issues kind of exist separately from assets until you tie the two together. So let's take a look at how the assets database is kind of created, how it's configured. And that's by going into asset tables. And the big piece here is the asset types. Just like issue types is the big piece for an issue, right? Asset types is the big piece for assets. Now, I told you we were going to kind of lean heavily on the printer assets right here. So I'm going to edit this one. But it works the same way if you click Add New, right? If we were to add a new asset type. The first thing you can kind of see is this paragraph at the top, and that talks about the PC fields like MAC address and IP address, right? We're not dealing with those this time. We'll get into more detail about what exactly those fields are and how to use those when we talk about PC type assets. And you can see those fields are not included for this asset type right there. So non-PC type assets have their own set of normal fields that show up just for creating by default, just by creating an asset type. But just like an issue type, you can associate user-defined fields with that. Now, in issue types, as you guys know, right? So we're going to see who remembers, right? The custom screen tells us which user-defined fields go with which issue types, right? To contain that data. But in assets, right? It's the asset. There's no custom screen, so you have to create the user-defined fields directly here on the asset type. And you can see that I've got two different types of user-defined fields, like text fields and table-driven. So for a text field, right, we've got cartridge type, or maybe we need, I had a good example here. Let's add a, I probably spelled maintenance wrong, but we're gonna go with it here. So maybe we have a maintenance interval. Number of days, right? And that's just gonna be a text field in Issuetrak under this asset type. Now with our table-driven fields, and you guys know that when Issuetrak says table-driven, we're talking about drop-down menus, right? You're gonna have a defined list of values to select from. Assets kind of do things a little differently than issues. In table-driven fields, we use this thing called a value list. So you create the list of values first, then you associate it with a field. And if you guys remember your user-defined fields in Issuetrak for issues, it's just the other way around. You create the field first, then you say, I want this option, that option, the other option. So let's look at value lists, and I'm gonna go there. Say we've got this value list and it just needs to contain the word yes and the word no, right? So we choose yes or no from the dropdown. And that value list is entered by default, there by default with an Issuetrak installation. So when you get asset management, you'll have that value list, period. You can create other ones like printer type, right? But let's take a look at how this is set up. So when you use this value list, you'll get an option for yes and an option for no. Simple, right? That list of values. Now, we're gonna go back to our asset type, and I'm just gonna use the back arrow. But you guys can see we're back in asset types. And you can see that that yes, no value list is used with more than one user-defined field. So can toner be ordered in quantity? Well, that has an option for yes or no. And whether it's a network printer or not, right? That has an option for yes or no. Same thing with printer type. We had a customer that had that customer that supplies the digital printers, right? They needed to show two types for their printers. And I'm not familiar with the types of printers they did, but they needed it. They needed to show, okay, it's a laser printer, but it also does inkjet, right? So, okay, so they were able to set that up doing exactly this. All right, now the other kind of parts to setting up the table, some of the other big pieces here that I wanted to get into were the asset statuses too. We don't want to short run those. So in Issuetrak, as you know, an issue can be opened or closed. Well, an asset can either be active or not active, right? But then we need all of these shades of gray in between, all of the substatuses. So asset statuses are kind of those shades of gray between active and not active, right? And you can see available, right? In service, in transit, or in shop, right? Non-serviceable, right on down to if we need it for reporting purposes, we could report on the assets that were donated. I think about that for reporting purposes, right? That really helps you see what's going on. And in this case, we even had somebody that needed to reflect stolen equipment in their asset management database. I think that was the bicycle provider, as a matter of fact, Tony. Remember the guy that was doing the bicycle rentals? And he needed each asset was a bicycle. Each bicycle was an asset. So we need to show which ones had been stolen for reporting purposes. Yep. So we can show, so when he goes back to report, well, why don't I have 100 bicycles? Well, I've only got 98 because 2 of them were stolen. Right?
It's amazing. Asset management module is probably one of the most popular add-ons to Issuetrak. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing all of the different usages for it, whether it's the IT people keeping track of their PCs and you know the laser printers and the service requests for them, but you got the bike guy, keeping track of that. I got other people using it as a database. They're putting in the acquisition date, the acquisition cost. They're running reports so they can do a capital forecasting on their budget every year.
They're not even using them for issues, right? It's
yeah.
like, and we've got the guys that where each asset is a database too. Think about that. Think about that customer, right? Every asset, their business is to provide these databases to customers, right? So every time they supply a database, it's an asset, right? And they do updates to these databases, right? So they need to know when was the last time a customer had a problem with this database. Then they can go back and troubleshoot and skip that. Then once again, my air quotes are showing, right? The overhead view, what I call that management level view. They can see which databases had problems. Maybe those need some extra attention. Which databases haven't had problems, right? What servers are those on? And it goes back and they can do a lot of troubleshooting and get a real cost of ownership from using the asset management module. It's very useful for that type of thing.
It is hugely powerful, and it's like Issuetrak. It's got so many features built into the product that, rightly so, no one customer would ever enable everything on Issuetrak. Same thing on the asset management side. It's just that vanilla platform that most companies can leverage if they have the need for it. We got a customer that makes those large vacuum trucks.
Right.
So each asset is going to be one of these deliverable products. So they're tracking all the change orders on the build cycle or the customer engagement after delivery with it. So everything is in one bucket.
And that one really goes back to customer service, because their internal customers is the guy on the line where he says, hey, this thing is cracked, or I don't have the right screws for this application. I don't have the right materials for this application. And then their engineering team comes in and resolves that. They fix it, whatever the fix is. They get them the right materials, or they say, oh no, or they get them different. But then after the truck is built, then they also do sales and service with those, right? So the actual guy that drives that truck, the municipality that owns that truck, then they will call back and go, oh, well, I've got a VACCON truck and I need this. I need to know how much vacuum it should be drawing, or it's got a broken hydraulic pump. I need to know what kind of hydraulic pump to put on there, right? Or warranty calls, right? The same as they treat that very similar to customer service, right? So
and then we have the people that make the components on the fire trucks.
That's right.
All those different assemblies rolling up together.
Right.
Again, customer support, engaging the public or the consumer with the end goods, but they're going through the dealer channels. They're going through the local manufacturer's rep that sold it, the fire department that owns it. So they're keeping track of all those players, leveraging the capability in Issuetrak on the issue side, as well as then on the asset management side, all of that, the different data points. So
what's my buddy's name over there? What's the lady that works over there that I talk to all the time? I can't remember. I'll think of it later. We'll talk. But anyway, if she's listening, I've forgotten your name temporarily, but I love you. And I'm missing you there. Don't see it in the list. So, all right. Anyway, so let's get into some of the other pieces that make the asset tables sing, right? That really allow you to flesh out an asset and give the reporting real value. So the other thing I wanted to get into here was locations, right? So we've got these Issuetrak locations, right, which we use a million different ways. But for example, we've got like schools or building locations or facility location, floors, right? Facility locations. But then sometimes, usually the asset location is a different field. It's a different list of locations. So sometimes we need to make that more specific. It's not just the building, which is the Issuetrak location. It's this floor of the building, or it's, as you can see here, it's the hot shelf or the industrial floor, the manufacturing location in this building. Right? I kind of want you guys, the top two there were kind of a really special thing that we did for drilling rigs, right? If a drilling rig was an asset, that we kind of need some asset locations to tell us where that drilling rig is right now. It's not really, I don't think that's a very general idea. It's very highly specialized to that type of thing. But I think the other asset locations here match a little bit better for the general use of asset location.
Yeah, but Paul, I like that though, because it's a perfect segue into one of the capabilities on the asset is the parent-child.
Right.
So here you might have 5 rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, but you might have 300 different items in your asset database that you're tracking. As those components are coming back and forth, leaving the rig, going back for, swapping out back on, the support facility on land, you
And
can keep track of all your moving pieces.
we're gonna do a good 10 minutes on that. I have it. It's in my list. We're gonna get
Okay.
there. Promise. Unless we run out of time, which I doubt. So the other piece that I wanted to cover here in the asset tables is the manufacturer, right? This allows you to do that cumulative reporting, get that ROI, and make those management decisions. Right. Well, enough about the tables, right? Let's see how one of these things is actually put together, right? So I'm going to go back to assets. I told you guys I wanted to start on the printer, kind of lean heavily on this printer asset. And I've only got one of them, as you can see in my summary. So I'm going to bring that up. Now, I wanted to be very clear that with these non-PC type assets, how did this get into the system? Is what probably I'll bet you there's at least one person out there that's wondering, well, how did this actually get into the system? And in this case, it was entered by me before somebody deleted my account, right? Probably deleted back in, it was, but most of our customers are either going to manually enter these non-PC assets, or they're going to use data services, right? Remember, data services do cost you money, but that may be worth it to get all of your assets laid out here. If you have questions, ask either Tony or I, just let us know. All right, so let's dig into the idea here. If we scroll down the page, you can see we've got things like asset name, asset type. There it tells us what we're gonna type of asset. And I really wanted to kind of skip down here first to get to the general information. All of those user-defined fields that we were just looking at? On an asset, they're all contained in general information. And this is one of those things. I see a lot of customers, they'll add the user-defined fields to make the data what they need, but then they don't notice it on the asset because it's not at the top of the page anymore. Now, some other things I wanted to get into here, some tips and tricks and some lesser known things. When we select this on an issue, excuse me, we can either type the asset number, which is automatically created by Issuetrak when the asset is entered, or the asset name, but we can also search by inventory number or asset location, right? We're back to the asset location field, right, Tony? That idea of here's the Issuetrak location, but what we're actually going to search for in Issuetrak when we select this asset is the asset location. And we'll do that in a minute. We'll pull up an issue and we'll select an asset for it.
And those are all great for reporting.
Exactly.
Like you said earlier, just having those in there, so now you can, run a report. What's the capital value of the equipment we have at this branch versus this one? On the asset name, that's the smart type ahead.
Right.
So when you're entering it on the issue, so think about going back to that customer service scenario. This is where you're going to put your serial number. Oh, sir, ma'am, what's the serial number on that product? You type that in right on your issue ticket. You have all of this information, the details that you're looking at, plus you have the service history on that particular piece of equipment.
And for that very reason, that makes the point I wanted to drive. Thank you, Tony. That's perfect. It makes the point I wanted to kind of drive to. Sometimes we duplicate information on these, right? So if your customer knows the serial number, make that the asset name, because that's what they're going to know when they call or email you, right? Makes it easier for your team to bring up that asset history. Same thing with location, right? Sometimes the customer only knows the location that's familiar to them. So you build a list of asset locations that means something to the customer. Then that helps you when you select their asset on the submit page, or if you're asking them to log in and do it, then it helps them search for and select their asset on the submit page. So let's look at that. Now, we're coming back to this page. I promise we're going to come back and really pick apart an asset record. But I wanted to show you guys, because this will make a little more sense here. Here's the asset field. And when he talks about type ahead, so IT-printer, right? I'm going to use
One of my customers is a large national chain of fitness clubs, and they use Issuetrak in a customer support capacity. They also use it to track the maintenance needs on all of the treadmills, elliptical, all of those pieces of equipment. So somebody goes to the front desk and they say, hey, the phone jack in treadmill 123, where it has the big decal on the asset tag on the piece of equipment, the person at the front desk, they have high turnover, they're in the retail business, they open a ticket, they just start typing in the tag number like Paul is showing you here, and it's going to, the more numbers you type on a tag number, the shorter the list gets, and then you identify it right from there. So back to you, Paul.
That's the type ahead here, and somebody has rearranged my the organizations here, moved my assets around for me. So this is why we can't have nice things, right, Tony? So what I'd like to show you guys is we'll do a clear fields and search. Can you guys see that? Do a clear and search, and that'll bring up our list of all assets because my account is allowed to see all assets. And we'll come down to that piece IT printer asset here. We select it. Now, the big thing I wanted you guys to get to, we could search by type, are the searchable fields down here. Like maybe you don't know the name of the asset, or maybe we didn't use good naming conventions like making the serial number the name of the asset, right? What fields can you actually search by? We're here on the submit page, or we're not over in asset management, we're here in the submit page. You can't search by just anything. You have to search by asset location, type, asset number, organization, of course, through the organizations you're allowed to see. Of course, there's asset name, right? Inventory number or user ID. Right now, we want to keep that in mind because your account, your end user's accounts may only be able to see certain fields or certain organizations. So they may be limited from seeing the assets they need to see. That's something we keep in mind. We have customers logging in. Like I said, customer service goes back to visibility, right? So let me pull this up here. And there's our asset record, the one we were just looking at. Oh, okay. So you can see now, I'm going to cover, and you can see it right here. Now, what Tony was kind of talking about was this view-related items. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes before we get to the bottom of our asset record here. I want to talk about the parent-child item, and you can see that right below the serial, right? We just got done talking about inventory number. You saw that was searchable, whereas serial number and barcode number were not, right? So that's a place you may want to do some duplication. It all depends on your needs in the system. But then we've got this idea of a parent item, and that allows you to make a connection between one asset and another. And it's invaluable in reporting. Like that computer name, and I know that's a computer name just because I know, is related to this asset. Well, what's that relationship? This is the parent, that is the parent of this asset. It allows us to kind of show two assets tied together. You can see that right here. Now, if I wanted to get the information about that thing, right, this helps us in troubleshooting. Maybe I'm having problems with all of the printers that are attached to this computer, right? Then I could go back and troubleshoot. I'd know it was a problem with this computer, probably not with the printers attached to it. And where you can really see that, I wanted to give a really good example of that. I'm going to go back to asset management here. And Mike did this for a customer a couple of years back. The idea of this makes it really straightforward to see that parent-child. I know probably not all of us have been in a data center, but all of us kind of have that idea of a server rack, right? It's going to contain multiple servers. It's a stand, it's a rack, and then the servers just are bolted right in, right? The computers are bolted right in. So you might have 5 or 6 or 20 of them in there. And if all of those are assets and the server rack is an asset in Issuetrak, then you can see, so we've got the server rack, here are the servers within that rack. And you can see each one of them is listed as a child here. Come on, if I can get my mouse to work here. There we go. And in fact, this rack only has 3 computers in it, which you can see very quickly and use this to troubleshoot and get that overhead view, that management level view about what's going on with this asset very quickly. right? Now I'm going to stay, actually, I'm going to go back to our printer asset here because I also wanted to get to the bottom of the bottom of the record, right? We want to get down to the bottom of it. So we hit our back arrow here and we'll go back to our one printer. And the stuff at the bottom is the stuff that a lot of our customers don't use, but I think it's some of the most important stuff on the record, the most useful. Down here, the purchase and lease information, right? This is the kind of institutional knowledge that really makes the asset management module useful. So if I want to know all of the equipment that where the lease is going to expire this year or this month, then I can go back and pull a report on that as long as these fields are filled out. And this really helps managing the assets, managing that money that goes along with the assets. I see very few customers use this, but I think it really allows you to tune up your customer service game or tune up your asset game if that's all you're worried about.
And then with the custom reports, the scheduled reports,
right,
all of this, it just shows up in your inbox of your email client once a month of, all your PMs, your renewals, whatever you want to track. Again, we give you that vanilla platform for that. Sorry.
Exactly. No, quite all right. And then I also kind of hinted at it a minute ago, but another part of that institutional knowledge is the comments and the notes, right? Maybe you just need to know this used to be Bob's printer, right? Somebody would want to know that. Maybe Bob liked to eat on his printer, right? Maybe, who knows, right? So this would be the comments and notes help you put that in. It's free form, free text. And normally you can see who entered that information. This time you can't. But you can see in the notes, I put a note in this on 3 days ago that the roller feed for this printer is in locker E10, right? That's the idea. It's that institutional knowledge. And if we didn't have a place to put that, right, then that institutional knowledge could get lost, right? But this has a very clear place to put it, very easy. And we know that that note goes along with this asset. Now that's non-PC assets in Issuetrak. Tony, how am I doing for time? Do I have time to do it?
We need to wrap up because I want to make sure we have time for the new feature.
Oh, okay. Okay, then we will do reporting on assets and in a separate session when we talk about IT assets, PC assets. So we'll hold back. I think that gives you guys probably more than most people wanted to know about assets, or I hope it did anyway. I hope I really drove in the details here.